At dinner, my daughter-in-law leaned in and breathed, "We don't want you around." And I smiled as I raised my glass like it was any other Sunday. The rosemary chicken steamed from a chipped white platter, and the Chardonnay kissed my lip with a chill I needed. Candlelight bounced off her glossed smile. I could smell her bright citrus perfume over the gravy and sourdough. The chandelier hummed, the air vent sighed, and the forks kept time like tiny metronomes. I held my smile the way a woman holds a door in a storm, tight, polite, and bracing for the gust. Emily's eyes were flat as glass, and under the table, her knee knocked mine as if to nudge me off the edge quietly. Daniel stared at his plate, jaw set, while little Sophie traced circles in her peas, and the lab thumped a tail against my sensible shoes. A wisp of silver hair tickled my cheek as my rings clicked the stem, each spot on my hands lit like tiny moons. Outside in the cul-de-sac, sprinklers hissed and a bike bell chimed. Normal life heckling our private little trial. I kept my chin lifted the way my mother taught me, tasting metal behind the wine. But then the room shifted, the kind that happens when truth elbows its way in, and Daniel set his fork down so gently it sounded louder than a slam. "Did you really just say that to my mother?" he asked, voice low, color rising under his beard as the chandelier threw hard shadows. Emily froze, smile curdling, and my glass chimed against my ring as my hand began to tremble. Sophie looked up, wide-eyed, while the dog whined and the roast cooled, and I realized my smile had become a shield and a signal. I cleared my throat, lifted my glass higher, and decided if they wanted lines drawn, I would use permanent ink. You want to know how dinner turned into a verdict whispered through teeth, and why I was ready with a toast? I'll tell you what led us to that table. The favors banked, the boundaries ignored, and the one message that made everything snap into focus. Stay with me, because the quiet things said behind closed doors have a way of banging pots in the open. And if you believe that respect at family tables should go both ways, hit subscribe to follow stories like this. Sometimes the sweetest smile hides the sharpest truth, and I'm done eating in the dark. I felt the stem of the glass press into the soft pad between my thumb and finger and told my hand to be steady, the way you tell a child not to spill. Candlelight made halos in the wine and threw little moons on the gold rim of the plates we only see on Sundays. The smell of rosemary and butter meant to comfort, and I let it drift over me the way my mother's kitchen used to when she'd pull a chicken out of the oven after church. I kept my smile where it needed to be and let my eyes settle on the space beyond Emily's shoulder, on the framed school photo of my granddaughter with one front tooth missing, on the watercolor of their cul-de-sac that Emily had commissioned at Christmas, on the thermostat's steady bloom of numbers. All the while, the lab thumped his tail against my sensible shoes, and Sophie dug carefully in her peas as if there might be treasure under there. My name is Margaret, though most of the world has called me Maggie since I was 19, and the boy I married couldn't resist shortening anything he loved. I am 66, retired from teaching third grade at Elmwood in Naperville, where my days used to be meted out by bell rings and pencil shavings and the sweet ache of reading out loud in the afternoon. I liked it better than anyone expects a person to like their work. And when I retired 2 years ago and boxed up my classroom library with a knot in my throat, I told myself I had earned a quiet life of early walks on the Riverwalk and slow coffees and a little travel if I could manage. Instead, I found another rhythm. School pickups in the beige Honda I'd kept on the road with regular oil changes and prayer, banana bread loaves wrapped in a dish towel, and small hands slipping into mine every Tuesday when I crossed the parking lot and Sophie's braid bounced like a metronome to her steps. Tuesdays, always, me and the child named after my grandmother and the promise at the heart of a week. In those first months, Emily thanked me often. She'd been tired in the way new mothers are, and later in the way new managers are, always checking something on her phone, always remembering something she'd forgotten. She works in marketing, social strategy, she says, with the same crispness she brings to everything. And I respected the way her eyes sharpened when she talked about a campaign. Daniel works with numbers in a mid-rise off Ogden Avenue, a few floors below a dentist I used to see. He gets very quiet when he's thinking. It's how Tom was, too, my husband, when he used to sit at our little kitchen table with the Naperville sun spread around his coffee and a list of hardware store items in his pocket. He died 11 years ago, too young for the way he adored his life, and I have been doing my best to honor him by taking care of what he loved. Our kid, our home, our small pieces of ordinary. The ordinary is where I am at my best. My mornings are early and slow. I feed the wrens with a scoop of seed on the back step, turn on the local news, and then switch to the classical station when the weather has had its say, and I walk the loop by the high school track. I pick up library books that smell like paper and sunshine. I straighten the Afghan my mother crocheted in colors we would call outdated now, but which still know how to sing against my couch. I bake in cast iron because it makes me feel connected to women I never met, but know anyway, in my hands. I am good at casseroles that hold you until morning. I am good at showing up with a casserole. When Daniel and Emily bought this house and we stood in the kitchen that first day, I ran my palm over the quartz counter the way I used to pet our old Labrador's ears. Feels like you, I teased. Sturdy. Cold at first and then warm as you stand there. Emily smiled then, all teeth and gloss, and said something about marble being impractical with children. I am not marble. I am the sturdy thing that looks simple and isn't. I did not have the money when Daniel needed it. I find it better to say it plainly and not pretend there was comfort where there wasn't. After Tom died, the insurance was there but smaller than we'd counted on, and the mortgage sat heavy in its envelope every first of the month. I took a second job after soccer practice some nights, tutoring 2 brothers from down the block in math. I made soups that stretch. I took a Saturday subbing gig at a friend's daycare. I sold a bracelet my grandmother left me to cover Daniel's first semester meal plan at U of I when the numbers did not add up one August in a way that made me feel dizzy. I kept the old Corolla running by a mix of miracle and the kindness of the man at the corner shop who has known my face for 20 years. I did what mothers do. I held my breath and my tongue and my boy, and I said yes when the world asked me something I didn't know how to do. When Daniel called one spring and said, "Mom, I think she's the one," I said, "Bring her Sunday," in the same voice I used to call my students to the carpet. Emily wore a navy dress and held a bouquet of tulips she'd brought herself and gave me a hug that landed 3 inches from my shoulders. She told me she was from Iowa originally, that she liked her coffee black and her calendars full, that she could make a lemon tart that would make me cry. She did not cry at my kitchen table when I told her I was happy for her, and I liked that. The way she apparently kept a firm hand on the things inside her. We went to Cantigny in the summer for their engagement photos, and I sat on a bench and watched them pose among the roses, and I thought of every wedding I'd seen in our little church and the way the brides all walked a little too fast down the aisle because the future was calling them in a loud voice. At their wedding, I sat in the row behind Emily's parents, who flew in from Des Moines with matching suitcases and a habit of saying, "Well now, isn't that something?" That reminded me of my Aunt Doris. It rained in the afternoon and then stopped, and the pavement steamed, and the pastor wiped the chairs twice, and the photographer told me in a kind voice that the shots of just the immediate family shouldn't include me. I didn't argue. I am a woman who knows how to make myself smaller when a moment needs me to be the shape of air around other people's joy. My chest hurt, and I took a breath and looked for Tom in the clouds and thought, "We made it, love. He found a good life." I held the bouquet while someone pinned a boutonniere to my son's lapel, and I kept steady because that was my part. I watched the ways Emily moved through rooms. She rearranged my kitchen when she came over the first Thanksgiving they hosted, labeling my spices with a label maker she kept in her bag and suggesting we keep the coriander and curry in the pantry for your nose. She planned with precision, and if my Jell-O salad did not fit the aesthetic of her table that year, white pumpkins and eucalyptus draped like garland, then I brought it in a glass bowl and left it on the counter with a spoon. People have their preferences. I have mine. I am old enough to know where to set down what nobody wants to carry. The small slights came like a fine powder at first, so light you shouldn't feel them and still do. A politely worded email about grandparent expectations after Sophie was born, using a template someone must have found online. "We respect your role, but need you to check in before coming by. We will not be doing nicknames, so please call her Sophia, not Soph. If you hold her, please wash your hands and avoid fragrances. We are prioritizing bonding time. Thank you for understanding. I washed my hands. I wore unscented lotion. I knocked and stepped back from the door instead of letting myself in. I sat at the edge of the couch with my hands in my lap until they said I could take her. And when they did, I took her like a person takes a blessing and pressed her warm cheek to mine. When the colic set in and Emily's eyes got glassy, I rocked that child with the kind of muscle memory you keep even after your body changes shape. I sang the songs I knew and then hummed the ones I didn't recall. Emily would disappear into the bedroom and scroll, I suppose, and Daniel would lift his shoulders as if he could make a wall between me and any comment he worried I might offer. I did not offer comments. I offered laundry folded into squares, so neat they could be an apology for all the years in which I did not know how to help anyone but outlast the day. Do not think I have not swallowed things in my life so other people could keep breathing. I have been swallowing down my thoughts since I was a 12-year-old girl kneading dough at my mother's side while my father's footsteps told us if we'd earned a quiet dinner or not. After you see a woman hold her lips shut so long to keep peace that they chap in winter, you learn the family skill. It had been fine mostly until it wasn't. Until there was the baby's first birthday, and my name wasn't on the small chalkboard with "People I Love," because we're trying to keep the text short. Until there was the 4th of July when they spent the day at Emily's sister's lake house in Michigan without calling to see if I wanted to come down and wave at boats from the dock. Until there were Sundays when I parked in their driveway with a plate of deviled eggs and a pie, only to have the door open 6 inches, and Emily stand there with her shoulders squared and a smile that meant, "This is inconvenient," and say, "We're actually doing just us tonight, nuclear family time," in a voice that implied I needed a dictionary. I have learned a lot from 3rd graders about the words people use when they think they are being kind. I have a doctorate by now. There were good moments that kept me in the hammock between hope and resignation. There was the time in December when the radiator hissed and we watched the Macy's parade together while Sophie lined up her stuffed animals on the couch, and Emily laughed at my story about the year the marching band's plumes caught in the wind and we all looked like dandelions with feet. There was the afternoon I sat on the Riverwalk with the stroller while Emily ducked into a shop for 15 minutes that turned into a quiet hour, and when she came back, she put a warm paper bag with a sweater in my lap and said, "It's your color," in a voice that did not require me to earn the gift. I have kept that sweater folded in my drawer, like you keep a letter you reread when the weather goes bad. 2 weeks before this Sunday dinner, I was at my kitchen table with a $3 bouquet of carnations from Jewel Osco and my set of good pens because I like to make any list look like it might sit in a museum. I was making notes for a trip I've been threatening to take to Santa Fe in the spring, art I would stand in front of, sauces I would taste. I'd put a hold on 2 books about Georgia O'Keeffe at the library and felt brave considering the price of a small hotel room. My phone buzzed and lit up with a message, and because we all live connected in strange ways now, it was from Emily, though it came through the family thread we had used when Sophie was born for pictures and doctor updates, and then later for videos of her first steps. In this country, we share our babies like public holidays, and then one day, someone decides the day belongs to them, and you are supposed to feel grateful they will still invite you to the parade. The message was not meant for me. I knew it the way you know you're about to step off a curb that isn't there. After dinner Sunday, we should talk to your mom, it said. And then, on the gray bubble's little tail, an echo. We don't want her around like this anymore. The drop-ins, the constant advice, the overnights when Sophie gets sick, it's too much. We have to set that boundary. Nuclear family. I read it once and then again, as if a second read might turn the letters into different shapes, the way clouds will be a horse and then a chair if you squint. I scrolled back to see if there was another message to soften or sharpen it. There wasn't. I sat with my pen in my hand and felt the old ache in my chest that comes when love gets pinched, and I laid the pen down so neatly it looked like I was leaving something at a grave. I looked around my kitchen, at the rooster timer Timmy Harris gave me my second year of teaching, at the collection of mugs with little chips on their rims that map morning conversations, at the photo of Daniel holding a fish so proud you'd think he'd pulled the moon from the lake. I went to the sink, ran water until it was hot, and washed the dishes that had been patiently waiting like a quiet child with a hand raised. I find that when I do the next right thing with my hands, my heart will sometimes follow. Over the water's rush, I heard my mother in my head say what she always did when the world set a plate in front of me I didn't order. "We don't have to eat everything we're served, Maggie." I dried my hands, took a deep breath that made my ribs lift, and I texted Daniel. "Looking forward to Sunday," I wrote. "I'll bring that salad you like." He sent back a heart and a "can't wait," and I sat down slowly, the way you reach for a chair you are not sure will be there. I did not tell him about the message. I did not call Emily. I let the quiet be the place I did my thinking. If you think women my age don't have tools, you haven't watched us fix a lifetime of small leaks with nothing but patience and a wrench we bought in 1982. I went to Target and bought a bottle of a Chardonnay I remembered Emily saying she liked. I selected lemons from the stack with the care of choosing words. I picked rosemary from the bush by my porch and wrapped it in a damp paper towel, because some acts can be done with grace, even when grace is not being offered back. On Sunday, I laid out my one nice blouse, the soft blue one with buttons like pearls and sleeves that forgive arms that have lifted more than they've been lifted, and ironed it so smooth it might have been ironed by someone who believed in fresh starts. I slipped on my flats that don't pinch and dabbed on a bit of mascara, because my mother taught me you show respect to those you love by being your best in their presence. Outside, the church bells near Washington Street rang the hour, and the sound of them carried me back to every Sunday I ever wanted to keep. I arrived on time, as always. Emily had set the table beautifully, as always. Chargers under plates, napkins that had been folded like small hearts and rested at an angle, candles in glass cylinders so the flame's wake stayed steady. The kitchen smelled clean in a lemon smell that made me believe in things being possible. Murphy greeted me like I was something he'd been waiting for and forgot, just for a second, that a boundary had been declared. Sophie wrapped her arms around me and then turned her face into my waist and said, "Gran, do you have the carrots?" Because I always bring little ones for her to dip in hummus. Emily glanced at the bag in my hand and said, "Oh, good, you remembered," and then went back to slicing a baguette with a sawtooth knife, as if the bread needed to be taught a lesson. We moved into the dining room when the chicken said it was ready by perfuming the whole first floor. I set the salad down, the one with oranges that Daniel calls like sunshine, and we settled in with the small talk that oils a meal. Sophie told us about a girl named Hazel who had an enormous bow and a tiny voice. Daniel told me about a new client who makes watches with faces so simple you can see your own reflection in them. Emily told me about a friend's trip to Sedona and how restorative it had been, and I nodded and said, "You should go." She looked at me as if I had handed her a foreign coin and she couldn't read the denomination. And then the whisper. The leaning in, the citrus smell, the soft words that sliced like the knife that had just met the bread. "We don't want you around," she breathed into my slower time, and I did what women like me do when we are told to leave the room we built. I stayed where I was and picked up the glass like all this was a toast I had planned. Daniel's fork made a gentle noise that sounded like the end of someone's patience. He turned to her and asked a question with his jaw, and the air vent gave a sigh it couldn't help. My words were not ready. They were ready in the sense a loaf is ready to go into the oven, shaped and scored, but not yet golden. Still, we are not given the timing we want. I set my glass down because my hand decided that was what it wanted, and I folded my napkin in half and laid it across my lap and said, "Emily," with as much tenderness as I could borrow from the part of me that loves my son more than I love being right. "I know you don't mean that sentence the way it came out," I said, and let the sentence hang there, like a picture I wanted them to see. She opened her mouth, and I lifted my palm a fraction, not to stop her, but to steady the air. I also know sometimes we say the thing that's at the bottom because the top has already cracked. Emily's eyes widened, and for a flicker of a second, she looked 12. I have sat on the carpet eye level with a lot of 12-year-olds who learned to use sharpness when what they needed was to say they were scared. I saw her small version look out of her, and then it was gone. I meant, she said carefully, we need more space as a family. It feels like sometimes you are present in a way that makes it hard for us to figure ourselves out. Daniel looked from her to me as if trying to read a language both of us knew and he hadn't had time to learn. Sophie laid her fork down and watched our mouths like she was following a game. The lab put his head on my knee. I hear you, I said. And I did. I have been in rooms with parents at conference tables where the only thing they needed was for someone to say, "You're not crazy. This is hard." I took a breath. And before you say another thing, I want you to hear me. Sometimes I am surprised when my voice doesn't waver because inside it feels like I am holding 10 strings and hoping they make a line. I have tried to be a help, I said, not a weight. It is the thing that makes me feel closest to Tom, helping someone I love. If I have been too present, that's mine to adjust. But I won't pretend I haven't been asked to be. After late night calls and can you pick up and she has a fever and I need a nap, I have given. I am not listing to keep score. I am listing because that is the story of how we got to this table. Emily's mouth tightened. We didn't ask for, she began, and then stopped because the truth will sometimes catch itself if it runs too fast. Daniel leaned forward. You did, he said to her, not unkindly. We both did. His voice had that edge you get when love turns back toward itself and says, listen. He turned to me. Mom, we appreciate it all. We do. He ran a hand through his hair, a move that always makes him look 8, sitting at my kitchen table doing long division. We need to figure out our own rhythm. Of course you do, I said. I smiled then, a small curve that came not from politeness, but from recognition. Every family does. It's like dancing in the kitchen. 2 people have to find the steps not because anyone else taught them, but because the song is playing and nobody is going to stop it. I want you to dance. Emily softened just enough to let me see it. Her shoulders lowered a little, and she looked at the chicken as if permission might be there. Okay, she said, but her voice carried the word like a shield. We can talk about a schedule. Boundaries. The word sat awkwardly between us like a wedge, and I thought of the message on my phone and the way I had walked around it for 2 days, like a person walks around an object in the middle of the room they cannot yet pick up. I decided not to set it on the table. Not yet. Sometimes the sharpest truth is like a lemon in a sauce. You don't pour it in all at once if you want anyone to keep eating. What I would like, I said slowly, is respect. Not for the casseroles or pickups or any of that. For me. For the fact that I am here because I love you, and because that is how I know to be alive. I won't come by unannounced. I will wait for invitations. I will do Tuesdays if that is helpful, and not do Tuesdays if it isn't. And if you need to be a closed circle for a while, I will be the person standing outside making sure nobody bumps into you. But I won't be told I'm not wanted in a room I helped pay for. Emily flinched. Just a fraction. The way you flinch when someone puts a palm against the door you were about to close. We paid for this house, she said. And then it flashed over her face. The memory of a spring afternoon at a bank office where I sat beside my son and signed my name as a co-signer because their credit was new and their future was already built into their eyes. I know, she added quickly. I'm grateful. It's not about the money. It rarely is, I said gently. Money is just the object we point at when we don't want to talk about the thing itself. What is the thing? Daniel asked. He sounded tired. It is hard for sons to sit between the woman who raised them and the woman they chose. When my father got small and sharp in our kitchen, my mother used to tell me to go sit on the back steps and count the gutters on the roof to remind myself what was stable. Daniel had no steps to sit on and no gutters to count, and we had dragged him here without meaning to. What's the thing, Mom? The thing is how we treat each other in the name of love, I said. I will bend, Daniel. I will bend the way the willow by the pond bends and does not break, because that is what willows do, and the pond always needs company. I will not stand here in your life like a tree that refuses to learn wind. But I won't bend in the way that makes me into something I am not. I am not a woman you send messages about like I am a policy question. I am not a shadow you move out of the picture because it ruins the light. The room got very quiet. You could have heard the lab dreaming. Sophie whispered, "I like when we dance in the kitchen," and then looked around as if she had said something she shouldn't. "We will," Daniel told her, and he meant it. He is good at meaning things. "Here is what we're going to do," I continued, because sometimes it helps to put rails on a conversation. "We are going to eat this nice chicken Emily made, and we're going to let our food be our teacher and remind us that small things like rosemary and bread you cut with your hand can carry a lot of peace. We are going to enjoy this evening. And then, this week, we'll sit down with our calendars. You tell me what you need and what you don't. If Tuesday doesn't work anymore, I will learn to walk on Wednesdays. I have a life to fill." I gave a small smile to the corner of the room where my own quiet waited for me. "If you're in a season where you need to be nuclear, I will be the porch light and not the house guest. But if there are emergencies, you call me, and I will put on my shoes and come." Emily blinked twice. For a moment I saw grief move in her like a weather front. The grief of someone who does not want to lose a person and also does not want to share. She swallowed and looked at her plate. "Thank you," she said, "for saying it. I know I'm not always—" She stopped herself, her jaw flexing. "I appreciate you. I believed half of it and decided to bless that half. When you teach long enough, you learn to praise the attempt and let the rest be encouragement." "You're welcome," I said. I lifted my glass then and let the weight settle in my hand again. "To grace," I offered, "and to courage." We touched our glasses in that little kiss they do, and I met Emily's eyes over the rims. "To making sure our granddaughter grows up with more words for love than rules for it." She nodded, and the corners of her mouth softened like a curtain. We ate. The conversation limped at first, because words after a skirmish always feel like stepping on stones in a creek, careful of moss. Then it found its feet. Sophie told a joke that was mostly a sound effect, and Daniel laughed and put his palm on the table and said, "That's my girl," in a tone that made me forgive the world its sharpness. Emily said she had seen a documentary on Zion and wanted to go. I told her about the trip I might take to New Mexico, and for a second, her eyes brightened. "Take me pictures," she said. "Only if natural light cooperates," I teased, and she smiled with her mouth, and then, a beat later, with her eyes. I cleared plates as if I were not clearing a field. "You sit," I told Emily when she moved to stand, and she did, which surprised me in a way that made me want to sit down too. I did the kitchen the way kitchens have always taught me to do them. Hot water, quiet hands, a towel over my shoulder. Emily came in after a bit and leaned against the doorframe. "I'm sorry," she said, and her voice was the same one she used when Sophie scratched her knee at the park across from the school. "I am, Maggie. I didn't mean to be harsh." "I know," I said. "You love your family big. That can make your elbows too pointy sometimes when you try to hold it all. I have done the same." She looked at me like I had given her permission to hand something heavy back to herself. Then, because I do not like leaving splinters in a conversation, I added, "One more thing. Don't use your phone to talk around me about me. It makes for a bad taste." Her face went white. She opened her mouth and closed it. "The message," I said, and let relief be the tone in my voice. "It came to me by mistake. We can't pretend like it didn't. Let's do better with our words." A flush rose on her neck. She began. I said it wrong. I did. I'm sorry." I saw her reach into her back pocket and pull out a small square of fabric, cloth napkin, always with a cloth napkin, and dab at the corner of her mouth though nothing was there. "I am trying," she whispered. "I don't know how to be a wife and a mother and a person sometimes and not be stretched." "I do," I said. "That's what I've been, stretched like a sweater, loved anyway." She looked at me for a long beat, and then she hung her head like a child and laughed softly in a way that did not ask permission. Sophie came in then and asked for dessert, and I said, "There's lemon cake." and we made a small ceremony out of cutting slices and adding berries. I watched Emily lick a smudge of glaze off a finger, and I saw the girl she might have been in some Iowa kitchen, licking beaters and rolling her eyes at a brother. We all carry our children with us like passengers. Sometimes it helps to wave to them. When the plates were in the dishwasher and the table was reset for whatever Monday would ask of it, I put on my coat. Daniel walked me to the door while Emily walked Murphy to keep him from deciding he belonged with me, because he always thinks that when I say goodbye. We stood there with our arms at our sides, like soldiers who don't know whether to salute. He reached for me then, in a quick movement, and hugged me in a way that put his chin on my head and reminded me of the time he still grew. "I love you," he said, low enough to be just ours. "I love you too," I said. "Let yourselves be a family. I'll be where you can find me." On the walk to my car, the air had that September bite that means football games and sweaters, and somewhere down the block a sprinkler was still clicking, stubborn against the season. I sat for a moment with my hands on the wheel and let the quiet wash over me. I did not cry, though the tears had lined themselves up politely sometime around the moment Emily whispered. I let them stand there in order and then asked them to go back to their seats. There are things to do when a chapter turns, and crying is only beautiful if it makes you stop long enough to see. At home, I took off my good blouse and hung it on the back of a chair, unbuttoned so it could remember a human shape overnight and not wrinkle into a story it didn't want. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea because my mother had 100 uses for hot water and I have learned most of them. I sat at my little table, the one that has held everything from homework to jigsaw puzzles to bills, and I opened my planner. It is a paper planner, even though the world wants me to live in my phone. I wrote "Call travel agent about Santa Fe" at the top of Tuesday. I underlined it because sometimes you have to look your joy in the eye and say, "I choose you." I wrote "library volunteer meeting" on Wednesday. I wrote "painting class" on Thursday because there is a flyer thumbtacked to the corkboard at the community center that I have walked past for a year and always thought, I'd like to try, and then kept walking because the day was full and the idea of asking myself to change felt like buying shoes in a bright color. There are other things to do. I need to call the bank and ask a few questions about the co-signature to make sure that if we are laying boundaries, we know where the fence posts go. I saved every receipt from the day I wrote the check for their down payment and tucked them into an envelope labeled "House," like a woman who believes in the future but keeps a map in the glove compartment. I will not wave paper as a flag. I will take it to the safe deposit box, and I will keep the spare key they gave me not in my purse, but in a small dish in my drawer, and I will only touch it when asked. I will update my will because it is what people who pay attention to their lives do when the ground shifts. I will put money into Sophie's college fund directly, and I will not apologize if I decide to put some of what I have into seeing red rocks and Adobe. I will buy a porch light with a sensor so it turns on when people walk by. Because if I am to be a porch, I will be the kind that welcomes. That night, after the tea went lukewarm and I had washed the cup and set it upside down on the towel the way my mother did and her mother back before her, I walked into the living room and stood in front of the shelf where my few framed photos live. Daniel at 6 with a baseball hat too big and a grin too big for his face. Emily in her white dress under an arch of eucalyptus, a strand of hair that had escaped making her look more human by accident than any stylist could have. Sophie in a yellow raincoat the day she discovered puddles were invitations. There is a picture of Tom, too, in a flannel shirt, looking over at me across a distance that is not measured in miles. I am doing my best, I told his slice of the world. I am making room where room is asked of me. I am keeping a chair for myself. I am carving out a place where I am not only someone's mother, but someone. I thought of Emily's message, the one that came like a bad weather alert, and how messages are tricky things, so easy to fire across a distance and so hard to absorb when they land. I thought of the way she looked at me at the sink, the way her "I'm sorry" made a small ripple in her armor, and I decided to believe in that ripple for one more day. I thought of Daniel's hug and the way a grown man still finds his mother with the top of his head when the world goes loud. I thought of Sophie, of the way her laugh sounds like a small bell you find in the corner of a thrift store that still rings true. And I promised myself I would be the kind of woman who gives that sound places to echo but does not demand it sing every time she enters the room. On my nightstand there is a book, the kind with a soft cover that bends under your thumb and a story that will catch you if you let it. I turned the lamp off and the house made its night noises, the settling and the ticking and the far-off car tires on the pavement 2 streets over. I lay there and I did what I have done every night since the world decided I would have to be stronger than I thought. I took inventory. 3 things I was grateful for. The way the rosemary made the kitchen smell like a place where good things begin. The sound of Daniel's low voice repeating, "I love you," as if he were rehearsing for when he would have to use it in a harder place. The look on Emily's face when she said, "Thank you," and meant it in some part of her. 3 things I would set down. The message that bit. The impulse to call first thing in the morning to make the peace a thing with a bow. The thought that I have to cram my life into the spaces other people give me. When morning came, the sky was pink with a promise I had not ordered, but was grateful they delivered. I put on my walking shoes and did my loop. The high school band was practicing in the field, and I walked slow so I could listen to the way they tried to find the same note together. I stopped by the bakery on Washington and bought myself a croissant as if I were in Paris and not suburban Illinois. And I ate it at a table by the window, because sometimes the best way to show yourself you were serious last night is to do a small, delicious thing before 9 a.m. I went to the library and picked up my O'Keeffe books and tucked them under my arm like a child. I made my list and sent an email to the community center to ask if there was space in the Thursday class. I called the travel agent number on the card someone left at the Rotary Club bulletin board and said, "Hi, my name is Margaret, and I want to see some red rocks." And the woman on the other end laughed like she had been waiting all week to hear someone say exactly that. At lunch, my phone pinged. It was a picture. Sophie, sitting on the stoop, her knees scrunched, her hands full of sidewalk chalk. "We're drawing hearts," Emily had captioned it. There was another message below it, and it was not an echo, but a simple thing. "Thank you for last night. Tuesday, yes?" I typed and erased and typed again, and then I wrote, "Yes, I'll be there at 3. Carrots?" A heart came back, green. I smiled, set the phone face down, and looked out the window at my small square of sky. You can love people with your whole life and still keep some of your life for yourself. You can be asked to step back from a place you set the table for and choose to step to the side instead of out the door. You can stand up at a table where someone whispered you out and speak, and you can do it in a voice that draws a boundary without drawing blood. There will be more to say. There always is. There will be days where the reserve in Emily's face wins, and days where the girl who licked lemon glaze steps forward. There will be a time, sooner than later I suspect, when something breaks, a tire, a spirit, a fever, and my phone will ring and I will go. There will be another time when my phone will not ring because they are practicing being a circle. And I will go see paintings done in a desert by a woman who learned her edges and her curves all by herself and then shared them with the world. I will be here, in my house with the Afghan and the rooster timer and the one blue blouse, ready to press my napkin in my lap and keep steady when the wind pulls at the door. I will be the porch light. And I will also be a woman who raises her glass when the room shifts and says, softly but firmly, to grace and to courage, and to making sure the love at this table tastes like something we all want to come back for. Quando acordei naquela segunda-feira, a casa estava cheia de silêncio novo, denso como massa de pão antes do forno. Não era só cansaço, era o fim de jeito antigo de ocupá-la. Minha xícara de porcelana azul, presente da coordenadora no meu primeiro ano de professora titular, ficou quente nas mãos pouco tempo demais. Abri todas as cortinas, como sempre faço quando preciso lembrar que o dia é maior do que o sentimento da véspera. Da minha janela, a rua de Naperville parecia igual à de sempre. As mesmas árvores esperando o outono, a caixa de correio inclinada do vizinho, o jornal doméstico dobrado na porta. Mas lá dentro, comigo, a manhã trazia a certeza de que alguma coisa em mim tinha mudado. Enquanto mexia o chá, fiquei pensando em tudo o que tinha me aguentado calada nas últimas semanas, meses, talvez anos, se eu for honesta. Passei a vida toda ensinando meninos e meninas como usar palavras que constroem e só aprendendo tarde demais como as palavras ferem quando são ditas de um jeito pequeno, só para caberem atrás da porta fechada. As injustiças nunca vieram grandes, vieram como poeira em trilho de trem, um acúmulo tão lento que só se vê quando passa o dedo sobre a superfície. No começo, eram só detalhes. A troca do meu purê de batatas pelo purê especial da Emily, sem manteiga, para a Sophie. Sogra, eu reorganizei a despensa, achei que ficava mais prático assim. A risada baixa quando eu fazia minhas piadas de professora cansada sobre lápis e horários. Depois vieram as exclusões. Almoços no clubinho dos amigos do trabalho dela, viagens de feriado para Michigan em que ficaria apertado para todo mundo. Um convite para cuidar rapidinho da Sophie enquanto a gente sai para jantar, que na volta virava um "Obrigada, mamãe. Você é sempre tão disponível, mas hoje realmente queremos ficar só nós três." E então, aquela humilhação domesticada aos domingos. Um olhar que não pedia entrada, um suspiro afundando a sala inteira quando eu deixava a torta na mesa, um sorriso polido, como móvel de loja, só decorando. O mais pesado não era a dureza direta, mas a caridade de quem acha que está te cedendo generosidade, quando, na verdade, quer só te dobrar para caber melhor nos próprios planos. E, no fundo, eu aceitava. Por Daniel, por Sophie. Pelo fantasma do Tom, que eu sentia sorrir para mim quando eu vestia minha blusa azul e aparava a franja como ele gostava. Carreguei essas pequenas rasgaduras no peito como quem cuida de suéter velho. Às vezes você esconde o fio puxado, às vezes ajeita rápido, às vezes simplesmente enrola o fio no dedo e finge que não vai se desfazer mais. Mas naquele jantar, a palavra de Emily, tão cuidadosamente crua, finalmente costurou todas essas pequenas humilhações num casaco pesado demais. Não queremos você por perto. Não vinha só de Emily, vinha dos domingos todos guardados, das semanas de "não precisa vir", do bebê "só agora não", do obrigado, mas desse tipo de obrigado que nem é palavra, só jeito de fechar a porta. Senti toda a minha infância observando minha mãe se encolher nas palavras do meu avô vibrar dentro do meu peito. Talvez por isso não chorei. Talvez por isso segurei meu sorriso com força, firme como uma tranca, e levantei a taça. Naquela noite, ao guardar minha blusa azul, senti o peso das escolhas todas que fiz para caber nas vidas alheias. Passei a mão pelo bolso do avental. Sim, ainda uso um avental floral, herança da minha mãe. Sempre deixo jogado ali na cadeira da cozinha. Dentro, um pequeno cartão amarelado dobrado que mantive desde o velório do Tom. Para Margaret, coragem é amor em travessia. Guarde um lugar para si. Foi ele o objeto símbolo, o lembrete que me acendeu algo. Não era mais só sobre aceitar o lugar na lateral, mas decidir se esse lugar ainda era digno do carinho que coloquei nos detalhes da vida de todos eles. Ali, bem ali, entre as dobras do tecido, entendi que não era egoísmo cuidar de mim. Era obrigação. Aquilo foi ficando claro nos gestos pequenos. Na lista de compras que fiz só para mim na terça-feira. Na decisão de mandar um e-mail para o clube do livro da biblioteca. No capricho quase cerimonial de preparar minha caneca de chá. Marquei na agenda. Quarta-feira, reunião de voluntários. Quinta-feira, aula de pintura. Porque ideias em cores vivas também vestem dignidade. Deixei separado algum dinheiro para enfim pegar aquele trem para Santa Fé, sentar diante de alguma aquarela e respirar devagar. Doeu assumir que minha vida podia ser mais do que o vazio entre uma ligação deles e outra, mas era verdade. No entanto, não queria virar as costas. Queria, sim, desenhar meu próprio círculo, mas com espaço para Daniel e Sophie entrarem quando quisessem. Fui até o cofre onde guardo as lembranças e os documentos e coloquei a chave reserva da casa deles num potinho de porcelana do Tom. Não carregaria mais no chaveiro, mas não jogaria fora. Meu plano, então, era simples, não espalhafatoso, silencioso, porém firme. Não publicaria indireta em rede social ou bateria a porta-saída. Eu ia dizer com calma de professora madura que mereço respeito e que meu tempo, minha presença, minha ajuda são presentes, não obrigações invisíveis. Diria que posso sim ficar longe, posso abrir espaço, mas a rejeição não seria mais aceita em silêncio. Eu nunca mais seria a mulher de ninguém, por favor. A partir dali, só seria por convite, por desejo, por escolha. Esperei algo me cutucar para buscar confrontos, mas a verdade é que sempre fui de resolver as coisas de frente. No fim da tarde de terça, preparei meu melhor pão de banana e liguei para Emily. Ela atendeu com a voz névoa, como quem espera mau tempo. Oi, Emily, é a Margaret. Você tem 1 minuto amanhã depois do trabalho? Preciso te devolver uma travessa e queria conversar rapidinho. Notei o silêncio dela, como se fosse perigoso. Tudo bem, Margaret, pode ser às 5. Desligamos. No dia seguinte, fui até a casa deles vestida com a blusa azul e com confiança nova brilhando feito esmalte fresco. Entrei com o pão e o cartão dobrado no bolso do avental. Sophie correu até mim, e Daniel me olhou com a apreensão de quem não sabe que batalha começou. Emily me recebeu na porta, sem perfume, roupas comuns, diferente do verniz habitual de domingo. Entre, por favor, disse. Sentei na mesa da cozinha, o espaço mais verdadeiro da casa. Toquei o cartão no bolso antes de começar. Emily e Daniel, queria conversar, só nós 3. Eles pararam atentos. Vocês sabem o quanto amo essa família, o quanto fiz e faço por vocês. Mas ontem, quando ouvi aquelas palavras, algo em mim precisou acordar. Respirei com calma. Eu não sou uma obrigação para vocês. Não nasci para ser encaixe ou incômodo. Minha voz não tremeu. Emily ficou rubra. Daniel engoliu seco. Sinto muito pelo jeito que falei, Margaret. Ela começou. Eu estava cansada, nervosa, não queria dizer daquele jeito. Levantei o cartão, símbolo do que decidi guardar só para mim. Coragem é amor em travessia. Li em voz alta. Passei minha vida amando vocês no silêncio, nos favores, nas presenças. Não quero mais ter que pedir licença para existir perto. Respeito não é só ausência de briga, é espaço justo. Olhei para eles. Se precisa de distância, me diga, mas seja com clareza e gentileza. Porque a partir de hoje, aceito só aquilo que é ofertado com cuidado. E se meu lugar for do lado de fora, estarei bem ali, de luz acesa, por escolha minha. Eles se entreolharam, cada um lidando com seu pedaço de verdade. Daniel se aproximou. Desculpa, mãe. Me perdi tentando agradar todo mundo. Sophie, ao longe, desenhava corações com giz. A paz daquela imagem me ajudou a respirar. Emily chorou baixinho, lágrima rápida. Eu tenho medo de não ser suficiente sozinha, de errar. Às vezes acabo afastando quem quero perto. Me perdoa? Tocou no meu braço, um gesto real, sem perfume. Só pele, só gente. Ficava ali a oferta de reconstrução. Não perfeita, mas possível. Naquele momento, compreendi que, às vezes, a maior virada dramática não é sair batendo portas, mas sim abrir uma para si. Levantei, tirei o pão da sacola e deixei na bancada. Vão ser domingos diferentes, talvez menos frequentes, avisei. Mas sempre que precisar de mim, de um pão, de um ombro, de uma ideia, me procure. Eu não sou fantasma nem enfeite. E se um dia sentir saudade, apareça, nem que seja só para um chá. Emily me abraçou, encostando o rosto na minha blusa. Obrigada, Meg, por ser dura e doce. Daniel completou, num tom que misturava menino e adulto. Você é casa, mãe. Só quero aprender a ser casa para minha família também. Quando saí, a tarde estava dourada. As folhas rodando na rua como promessas de que as estações mudam e tudo pode florir de novo. Caminhei até meu carro, respirei fundo e deixei o cartão dentro do porta-luvas, lugar de objetos para a próxima viagem. Decidi. Era hora de comprar minha passagem para Santa Fé. Naquele jantar, levantei minha taça porque sabia, no fundo, que o brinde era mais meu do que deles. Era pelo direito de existir inteira, pelo prêmio de atravessar mares e selar fronteiras sem ferir ninguém, mas sem me perder. Meu plano não era me retirar do mundo deles, era tornar meu o meu pedaço de mundo. Essa foi a noite em que marquei minha margem com tinta indelével, a noite em que palavras duras ouviram resposta, a noite em que a mulher do avental floral e das mãos firmes escolheu finalmente existir para além da utilidade. Coração em travessia, coragem no bolso e a luz do meu próprio lar acesa para mim. No dia seguinte ao nosso encontro na cozinha, a cidade parecia tão igual que quase era fácil crer que nada tinha mudado. Mas em mim, tudo era novidade. Um vazio misturado com leveza, que só as mulheres que um dia cederam demais e depois resolveram se dar um mundo um pouco maior, sabem sentir. O céu de Naperville ameaçava chuva, mas meu ânimo era de sol claro. Fiz meu café mais forte, abri a porta dos fundos para sentir a brisa e fiquei em pé, descalça, no tapete da cozinha, lembrando quantos domingos da vida eu aceitei migalha de afeto só para poder ficar por perto. Minha agenda finalmente era um território meu. Liguei para o clube do livro da biblioteca. A moça respondeu alegre, com aquele sotaque do meio-oeste que me faz pensar em feiras e tortas de maçã, e me convidou para comparecer quando quisesse sem compromisso. Sorri sozinha, imaginando se algum dia, depois de toda uma vida tentando agradar, eu enfim aprenderia o gosto pelo compromisso só com o que me serve. Anotei o endereço na página de terça-feira da minha agenda com minha letra de professora. A mesma pontuação firme de quem corrigiu tantos cadernos cheios de dúvidas e sonhos de crianças. Na quarta, atravessei a Main Street de bolsa no ombro, sentindo um bem-estar estranho diante da rotina comum. Passei pela loja de quinquilharias e entrei, como se merecesse aquele pequeno luxo do tempo sem afobação. Comprei uma caneca de cerâmica estampada de flores azuis, que imediatamente fez par com minha xícara especial. Um pequeno altar para as coisas que são só minhas. Depois, peguei o ônibus para o centro comunitário, caminhando devagar até a sala de pintura, onde o cheiro de tinta acrílica me saudou como um velho conhecido que retorna do nada. Havia ali senhoras mais velhas, uma delas chamada Linda, outra Ruth, todas com histórias guardadas na expressão das mãos. Sentamos juntas em torno de uma mesa com jornais velhos protegendo o tampo e começamos a arriscar pinceladas sobre papel. Senti pela primeira vez em muito tempo a alegria da cor sobre branco. Um gesto novo, uma oportunidade aberta. Entre uma conversa e outra contei, genericamente, que meus netos são meu maior presente, mas que agora queria aprender a presentear a mim mesma também. Linda sorriu e disse que pintar a própria história é mais fácil do que parece. Prometi tentar. No celular, floresciam mensagens suaves de Daniel. "Está tudo bem com você, mãe?" Ou "Sophie perguntou quando vai te ver de novo." Me surpreendi respondendo sem pressa, sem culpa, com a doçura de quem guia a criança por uma trilha, sabendo que lugar de avó pode ser abrigo, mas nunca gaiola. Desde nossa conversa, senti que um tipo de muralha invisível ao redor da minha relação com Emily começou a se desfazer. A cada recado que ela mandava, "Obrigada pelo pão, estava delicioso", ou um convite honesto. "Sophie pediu sua cenourinha terça, pode vir?" Havia menos rigidez, menos carne dura por cima de afetos. Ao mesmo tempo, segui firme nas pequenas decisões do meu novo mundo. Marquei a consulta que adiava faz meses. Finalmente fechei a sopa, que sempre acabava cedendo para as receitas deles. Reservei online meu bilhete para Santa Fé. Foi nesse gesto, o da compra de uma passagem só para mim, sem ninguém me esperar do outro lado, que percebi. Minha força não estava em ser necessária, mas em ser escolha. Pela primeira vez, minhas manhãs tinham a promessa de lugares onde ninguém olharia para mim esperando serviço, só companhia. Na sexta-feira choveu. Fui até o porão, puxei uma caixa antiga e ali dentro, entre fotografias e cartas, encontrei um cachecol de lã feito pela minha mãe. Abracei o objeto símbolo da minha travessia, meu cartão dobrado, amarelado, de tom. Passei os dedos sobre aquela frase: "Coragem é amor em travessia", e senti como se ele estivesse comigo, aprovando esse passo de me orientar pelo desejo, não só pela rotina que construí para agradar. Coloquei o cartão na carteira, como quem guarda santo de devoção. Agora, seria meu guia. Nas situações constrangedoras ou nas alegrias inéditas, bastava passar a mão para lembrar que meu coração podia ser meu lar. No sábado, recebi uma ligação inesperada. Emily. A voz dela estava um pouco trêmula, mas mais verdadeira do que antes, menos coberta de verniz. Maggie, você tem um tempinho hoje? Sophie queria te mostrar um desenho. E, se puder, queria conversar. Respirei fundo. Ainda havia medo de rejeição, mas junto, um calor de recomeço. Claro, querida. Vou aí pelas 3. Preparei os potinhos de cenouros baby. Coloquei o cachecol no pescoço e parti. A casa, desta vez, me recebeu diferente. O cachorro latiu com alegria. Daniel abriu a porta sorrindo. Sophie correu até mim com um papel azul coberto de corações de giz. Emily estava sem maquiagem, com camisa despojada, rindo espontânea das travessuras de Sophie. O cenário era o mesmo, mas o tom era outro, de abertura. Nos sentamos, tomando chá, agora na minha nova caneca, pois Sophie insistiu para usar a que tem flor que parece céu. Queria te agradecer de novo, Maggie, Emily disse, olhando nos meus olhos. Por abrir espaço, mas também por não desistir de nós. Nunca vou acertar sempre. Estou tentando. Meu mundo ficou caótico quando Sophie nasceu, e por medo de errar, comecei a levantar muralha em vez de ponte. Vi a sinceridade no rosto dela. Sei que já pedi desculpas, mas queria te garantir. Você é muito mais que uma obrigação. A gente já pensou em como seria tudo sem sua presença. E, sinceramente, seria uma perda danada. Nunca foi sobre não querer você. Foi sobre não saber pedir para você ser menos ou mais, sem te machucar. Quero aprender. Com você. Posso? Meu peito se abriu como cortina no verão. Pode, Emily. Eu também estou aprendendo. E tenho aceitado, nesses dias, que coragem mesmo é a gente caber inteira dentro da própria vida e ainda assim poder ouvir as necessidades de quem ama. Obrigada por tentar. Não peço perfeição, só verdade. Quero ser convidada, não empurrada. Quero espaço, mas lugar na mesa, mesmo que às vezes seja o da ponta. Daniel, que ouvia em silêncio, completou. Vamos cuidar mais do jeito que usamos as palavras, e também dos convites. Quero que a Sophie cresça sabendo que ser família é muito mais gesto do que obrigação. É casa feita de escolhas, não de imposição. Sophie, do alto dos seus anos de infância, pulou no meu colo e cochichou. Você é minha alegria de terça-feira, vovó. Ficamos ali, rindo, brincando de desenhar corações, ela com os giz de cera, eu no papel da minha nova existência. Emily sugeriu um piquenique para o domingo seguinte, no parque do Riverwalk. Não como tradição imposta, mas como escolha íntima, leve, livre do peso de expectativas e censuras. Nos dias seguintes, o clima de primavera invadiu as ruas, aquelas mesmas que pareciam desbotadas semanas atrás. Voltei à padaria da esquina, comprei pão quentinho e levei para casa, degustando sozinha na varanda, assistindo as folhas flutuarem pelo gramado. Aprendi a aproveitar, de verdade, os minutos disponíveis, sem preencher buracos com tarefas que não respondiam meu nome. Quando finalmente chegou o domingo do piquenique, o céu estava de um azul inquestionável. Preparei um bolo de limão, usei meu avental floral e guardei a chave reserva da casa deles de novo dentro do pote de porcelana, onde passei a guardar só o que é importante e tem sentido permanecer por escolha, não por carência. Caminhei até o parque sentindo os passos firmes, leves, uma mulher finalmente encaixada nela mesma. No gramado, Daniel, Emily e Sophie já estavam prontos. Cobertor, garrafinhas, risadas. Sentamos todos juntos e no meio do café servido em copos plásticos, Daniel levantou um brinde descontraído. As mães e avós que ensinam a gente a ser melhor. Cheers! Emily completou. E a coragem de atravessar o que é difícil e ainda assim escolher estar. Obrigada, Maggie. Senti uma onda de emoção. Segurei minha xícara de chá como se fosse um troféu invisível. Olhei para Sophie, que traçava o chão com gravetos, para Daniel, para Emily, e por um instante tudo estava onde deveria. Ali, naquela tarde morna no parque, entendi. Não precisava ser centro, bastava ser presença. Não precisava controlar, bastava ofertar. Meu papel não era garantir paz eterna, mas manter a luz acesa do lado de dentro, para que, se quisessem, sempre soubessem o caminho de volta ao meu colo, ao meu carinho, ao meu pão caseiro. No fim do dia, voltando para casa, a brisa trouxe o cheiro de grama cortada e lembranças boas. O cartão continuava guardado comigo, mas agora era convite, não memorial. Abri a porta do meu lar sabendo que, mesmo quando o convite não viesse, eu seria inteira na minha solidão escolhida. Coloquei o avental de lado, liguei para a agente de viagem e confirmei a data de Santa Fé. Quero os dias mais luminosos, por favor, e um quarto onde caiba só um coração em paz. Na sala, sentei para escrever um bilhete a mim mesma, como tantas vezes escrevi para alunos e para o Tom. Parabéns, Maggie. Você não só atravessou, você floresceu do lado de cá. Sorri, alisei o papel, coloquei junto do cartão símbolo e concluí. Coragem é mesmo amor em travessia. Meu amor virou ponte, e nenhuma ponte é feita para aprisionar quem passa, só para garantir que cheguem do outro lado. Se você chegou até aqui, talvez já saiba, ninguém precisa apagar quem é para caber em outro mundo. Com delicadeza, firmeza, coragem, a gente aprende a existir inteira, a amar sem desaparecer e a manter acesa a luz para receber ou despedir, sempre por escolha, nunca por obrigação. Se essa história tocou o seu coração, deixe seu comentário e me conte se você também já precisou atravessar mares para seguir amando. Curta, inscreva-se no canal e venha fazer parte dessa travessia comigo. Porque coragem, minha amiga, é quando o amor veste a liberdade de existir.